Would you like to keep a journal? Or are you interested in learning all about journaling and how to cultivate this great writing habit? Hi there, my name is Brian Collins and welcome to the Become a Writer Today show. In this video, I'm going to walk through exactly how you can build a journaling habit and what it can do for your writing. Now, I hope you like the content in this video. If you do, please hit thumbs up. And if you want to get more great writing advice like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. So I've been journaling on and off since I was 14 years of age. I started using paper notebooks and then I started using more fancy paper notebooks. Then I started using apps like Word before using a dedicated journaling app, which I'll cover later on in this video. I only really got serious about journaling in my late 20s when I took a course in Trinity College in Dublin. No, it wasn't in journaling, but while taking the course I spent some time in Trinity College Library and I found a great book by John Cheever. It wasn't one of his novels or his collection of short stories. It was a collection of his journals, which was published after his death. And I couldn't quite believe how a writer had turned all of his life into this literary work. It represented a portal into John Cheever's inner life. And from there, I knew I needed to turn journaling into something I did every now and again, into something that I did either every week or every day. Of course, there are many other famous journalers from history, Anne Frank being one of the most famous ones, and more recently, David Sedaris, the American humorist. And in fact, I'd recommend taking David Sedaris' course on Masterclass simply because he walks through how his journaling process helps him write essays, and I'm going to cover that in a moment. These days, I typically write a short journal entry in the morning of approximately 150 words, or alternatively, if I've missed a few days, I'll write a longer journal entry, usually on Friday or Sunday evenings, about what happened during the week and what I want to accomplish during the following week. I've written millions of words in various journals of all types, and journaling has helped me in a number of different ways, and it can help you too. Here are 3 different benefits for journaling. Firstly, journaling gets you to cultivate a writing habit, and if you're a new writer, that's one of the most important things that you can cultivate. It can be difficult to sit down in front of the blank page and start working on your stories or on your articles, but it's relatively easy to sit down and write a journal entry. And if you cultivate a daily journaling habit, it's easy to transform that into other types of writing, like personal essays or fiction or freelance writing. Secondly, journaling gets you to capture your ideas and events that happen in your life. They might seem inconsequential when they happen, but later on you may be surprised when you read back through journal entries. When I read back in journal entries from years ago, I was surprised by how much I'd forgotten. Things that happened in my family, things that had happened with friends, and things that had happened in work. And I was able to use some of these experiences for books and for articles, and it was also fun to read back on some of these experiences. The third reason why journaling is great is it's cheaper than therapy. You can pay hundreds of dollars to work with a therapist and have them listen to your problems. Sure, that may be helpful, but you can have somebody listen to problems for free through journaling. And I don't mean somebody breaks open your journal and starts reading it on your behalf, but by simply getting negative thoughts out of your head and onto the blank page into a journal, you are working through emotions and difficult experiences. When I read back in old journal entries, I was surprised, but I was also horrified by some of the negative experiences that I found in my journal. But I'd completely forgotten about them. So this was fantastic because it helped me see that I'd worked through these experiences and moved on. And that's something I probably would have found hard to do if I hadn't journaled in the first place. So now that you understand why you should journal, let's cover a couple of journaling rules and then I'll give you some tips for getting started. The first journaling rule is that you can't get it wrong. Whatever you write in your journal is for you and you alone. It doesn't matter if you say something negative about someone else in your family or at work or in your personal life. It doesn't matter if your entry doesn't make any sense, if it's illogical, if it's got grammar mistakes, or if it's just a conscious stream of prose. You can't get it wrong because a journal represents thoughts that are going on in your head, expressed in paper or expressed in a digital file. The second rule, and this is probably less of a rule and more of a recommendation, is that the benefits of journaling only really come when you do it consistently. You don't necessarily need to journal every day, but that can be helpful when you're starting out. But it is helpful if you journal a couple of times a week or every month, because then you'll have a body of entries that you can read back on and you'll be able to see how your journaling practice evolves. Now, when I started journaling, or when I took journaling more seriously, like many people, I held back because I was worried about self-censorship and what would happen if somebody read some of the more negative or darker entries in my journal. If this happens to you, simply use a password protected file in Word or Pages or whatever your writing app of choice is, and then you give yourself freedom to express yourself. Now you can use paper notebooks, but maybe put them somewhere safe where you're not worried about people going through them. Now let's cover 8 different ways that you can create a journaling habit that sticks. Write what happened on your summer holidays. Do you remember when you get this tip or this piece of homework when you went back to school after a break? Well, you can apply this to journaling. Simply write about what happened yesterday, last week, or last month, or a trip you took, or an event that you'd like to remember. You don't need to write up every single detail, but write up a couple of key interesting bits of information, put in some dialogue if you can, and describe what the experience meant to you. It may be fresh in your mind right now, but in a year's time, you may not remember everything about that trip you took or the person that you met. And everybody has done something every day that they can easily turn into a journal entry without spending more than 10 or 15 minutes on it. The second tip, if you're struggling with journaling, I'd recommend using writing prompts. Now, I've written a collection of 101 writing prompts which you can use for journaling, but you don't need to use these. You can use any type of writing prompt. You can use simple ones like the last time I, or the first time I, or the next time I, or my darkest teacher is, or a negative experience from my work life involved, or a positive experience from my work life involved, or I'd like to achieve, and then let yourself go. Write about whatever comes to mind using these prompts. It may seem a little bit organized and a little bit rigorous to use a prompt to start journaling. If you feel like that, then remove the prompt at the end of the journaling session and you'll still have an entry that you can use and read back on and reflect on. My third tip for you, especially if you want to take writing more seriously, is to consider turning your journals into a story. And this is something I learned from David Sedaris. Basically, when you're writing up what happened when you met a friend for coffee, or when you took a trip abroad, or when you and your partner went on some crazy adventure and it didn't quite go to plan, try inserting some scenes into the journal. What do I mean by scenes? Well, put dialogue into it, put character descriptions, and put different elements that you typically put into a fiction short story. No, you don't need to write, dozens of pages. You can only write a couple of 100 words, but it'll give your journal entry a little bit more flavor. And I guarantee you, when you read back on old entries, it's often much more fun to read back on dialogue or something crazy one of your kids said or one of your friends said, rather than he did this and she did that and I thought this. I used this exact approach to write a recent parenting book which you can get right now on Amazon, and I found it really helpful because I'd forgotten a lot of the things that had happened in our family. I'd forgotten about things that the kids had said, and I was able to extract some of these entries and later on turn them into chapters for this book. That brings me to my fourth tip for journaling, is sometimes you can simply use a dialogue exchange as a journal entry. Think of something your friend said, think of something a family member said, and write that conversation down in your journal. Now, it can be difficult to remember how a conversation went because we all have crazy recollections. So what I'd suggest is if you get home from somewhere and somebody said something interesting or memorable, simply write down the piece of dialogue into your journal or the notes app on your phone or whatever app you use. And later on, you can turn that piece of dialogue into a longer entry. In other words, it simply serves as something that you remember. My fifth journaling tip for you is to write just 150 words or write for just 5 or 10 minutes. Many people, when they try to journal for the first time, get all excited and they sit down to journal and work for an hour on an entry. And then the next day they say, I don't have time to do that because I've got to go to work, or I've got to do stuff with the kids, or I've got other commitments. But journaling isn't meant to be another job. It's just something small that you add to your life, like a meditation habit, and that's why it's reflective. So simply write yourself 100 or 150 words or write for 5 or 10 minutes. It shouldn't take that long, but it can often be enough to capture something memorable that you can later on review and expand on if you have more time. My next tip for you is to consider ideas that you come across in other books you read, in courses you take, in videos you watch, like this one. Perhaps there's something you agree with, perhaps there's something you disagree with, perhaps there's an idea that you'd like to put into practice in your own life. Write about what the idea meant to you if you agree or disagree with the key principles of the person who put forward the argument. Because while it's fine to journal about things that are happening in your own life, sometimes it's good to connect journal entries to things that are happening in the wider external world. My seventh journaling tip for you is to consider writing the occasional longer entry. So every Sunday evening I like to sit down and go through a couple of journal entries that might be 100 words long, and I'll expand them into much longer entries that are 1,000 words. It takes me about half an hour to do this because I've been journaling for quite a while. Maybe it'll take you a little bit longer, maybe you can do it a little bit quicker. You could even dictate these entries if you want, and I've also experimented with dictating journaling entries. But I find Turning short journal entries into longer journal entries is helpful because one of the key acts of writing is rewriting, and rewriting is often a lot more fun than writing. Now, there is a key recommendation I'd make here. Don't turn this into a self-censorship exercise. I'd still keep the shorter entry, but simply write a longer entry based on the shorter entry. So you're not going back and correcting something you said previously. You want to be able to see both entries in your journal. In other words, the first journal entry, which you don't touch, serves as a kind of prompt for the longer journal entry that you're going to spend a bit more time on. So what apps should you use to start journaling? Now, I love writing apps, but remember, the process should always come before any tools. So pen and paper and notepad work just fine, and I've used pen and paper notebooks for years for journals, and I have a box of them in the attic from when I was 14, which I'll probably never go through again because it was all about my teenage angst. Now, that said, there are lots of fancy apps you can use, but you can start with something simple. You can use Word and password protected in case you're worried about anybody sneaking in and reading your journal. Or you can use apps like Google Drive, and then you can journal almost anywhere. Or you could even use the Note app on your phone. And the Notes app on your phone could be perfectly fine because it's time-stamped and also it's connected to your login for your phone, so it's relatively secure. But there is a dedicated journaling app which I use and which I think is a great help. It's called Day One, and I like Day One because it's purpose-built for journaling, and it enables me to save audio notes and to save photographs into the Day One mobile app, and then later on I can write them up on my iPad or on my computer when I'm back at my writing desk. There's a couple of other journaling apps or other apps you can use for capturing ideas like Roam Research and Evernote, which I've used for different types of journaling. But for the practice of reflective journaling, which I've described in this video, Day One app is the app I keep returning to, and that's one I recommend. And finally, remember, if you've got a body of work in your journal, consider turning some of the entries into something more public facing. I don't mean just publishing all of your work online, but could you turn some of the key themes from your journal into a personal essay that you submit to a writing competition, into a chapter for one of your latest books, or into something that you publish on your blog or your website? Because readers love personal stories. It helps them connect with the author behind it. So there you go. That's how you can start a journaling habit. Now, I hope you like the content in this video. If you've got questions about journaling or other types of writing, please let me know in the comments section. And if you'd like to get more videos like this, don't forget to press subscribe.